We finally had our first look at the James Bond First Light gameplay a couple of nights ago, and I am still quietly positive and hopeful about this game. I've been saying for years and years that basically since they announced it, I don't think there's a single better studio that would make sense to make a new proper James Bond game than IO Interactive after all their Hitman success in the last few years. It really suits that gameplay style really well, in the sort of sneaking about stealthy way with gadgets and distractions and disguises and all those kind of things. The gameplay itself, I do have issues with. I don't think it's a perfect showcase of the game, even though I'm still quietly hopeful about the possibilities of First Light. I think that a lot of the gameplay that they've shown in the state of play was a little bit too action heavy for me. I'm hoping that's not the majority kind of sense of the game, because when I think of James Bond, you know, I do think of trying to charm your way through things, or just being a general spy where you have to, you know, come up with solutions to get around problems rather than fighting your way through. So I'm hoping that the actually nature of the gameplay that was shown is just a marketing thing and just there to kind of reel people into this new version of it. So the gameplay starts with a lot of driving as well. Doesn't look that entertaining because it's such a long sequence, and there's a couple of sequences in which the driving is prominent, and they don't really look all that exhilarating or exciting, because it looks very scripted, like a lot of driving sort of chase sequences are in games, but also the driving just looks a little bit clunky, doesn't quite look like it will have a nice flow to it. Obviously we can't tell until we get our hands on it, but the way it just looks and feels, I'm not sold on that idea. And I know you have to include the cars as part of the James Bond sort of franchise and character, but yeah, the driving just looks a little bit off to me, and that's probably the bit I'm least excited about from what they've shown. We do then see a sort of longer sequence of him going into this mansion and trying to find the bellboy by getting into the mansion and, you know, finding his way through that situation, which we see quite a bit of, but without really knowing the context of how the gadgets work in that moment. It felt a little bit overwhelming with what all these icons are, and to what extent the systems that they used in Hitman have been brought over to this one. I'm hoping it's more than what we've seen, because it very quickly kind of, again, just jumps back into action. And we see a lot of action once the sort of main car chase has happened, really. So I'm hoping that when you get into these levels, like the mansion that they've shown, that there's more ways to explore and to accomplish your objective more than what they've sort of shown in that sequence. The moment where it does get into action, you know, when he's sort of fighting on the plane and going on the runway and trying to get through all these people, just is a little bit too ridiculous for me. I understand that, you know, James Bond does have a license to kill, and there's plenty of action sequences in the movies, but this is just a bit silly. It's so one-man army against all these heavily armored bad guys, shall we say. You know, they've all got much bigger guns and much better armor, and yet he's just shooting his way through and punching them in the head, and even though they've got helmets on, and just knocking them out one by one. And I thought we'd really come a lot further in game design than just sticking enormous red barrels everywhere. And it's always fun to shoot a red barrel, don't get me wrong, but when there's absolutely like dozens of them littered all over the place and James Bond's just shooting ones right in front of him, kind of is doing a disservice to the representation of the game and what it's trying to get across, I think. I don't really want this to be an action heavy game. I do want this more to be basically a Hitman game, but with a James Bond skin. And after these prolonged action sequences they show us, it doesn't really get much less actiony than that. They do kind of show that there's multiple ways to do things, like how there's different ways to get the camera in the mission that they show, but then it does go back to showcasing the action quite a lot, with, you know, talking a little bit about the gadgets, which of course is great. You know, that's what James Bond is also famous for, is the gadgets, and looking forward to testing those out. But yeah, this focus on action I think is the wrong turn for this game. I'm hoping the action isn't as frequent as how it seems to be in the gameplay that they've shown. It does feel like they're trying to target the Uncharted audience rather than either the Hitman or James Bond audiences with this one. You know, he climbs onto a plane after driving a ramp vehicle and jumps onto the plane and is fighting people on the wings, and then gets inside and tilts the plane with all these crates flying everywhere. It's a cool, fun set piece, don't get me wrong, but Does it work in a James Bond game? I'm not sure at the moment. It just feels a little bit over the top. You know, I'm not even a huge James Bond fan anyway, and I've only played a few of the games over the years. Well, the ones I have played, I do remember them seeming to be a bit more stealth focused, or actually a bit more of like you're trying to be a spy rather than to be an action hero. And so, with all that said, I'm still quietly confident because I still think that there is no better studio to handle a game like James Bond First Light than IO Interactive, given how great the Hitman games have been in recent times. And I know Hitman's always been really good, but I've really particularly enjoyed the World of Assassination trilogy. And so I really do hope that First Light carries on with that tradition of how they've been doing it, just with a James Bond skin on it. And obviously we'll see what happens in future showcases before it finally releases, but I'm hoping they'll show off a little bit more of the things you can do to get around problems and figure your way to your objective, rather than just having to shoot your way through at particular checkpoints. So yeah, quietly hopeful. I'm not 100% sold on the driving or the combat stuff, but we'll see how that comes out in the wash. And that's kind of all my thoughts at the moment. I know this is our first show of the gameplay, so that hopefully there's plenty more to see in the future, but at the moment I'm still reserving positive and hopeful judgment that this will be a game that they do well and makes people really care about a James Bond video game again. So until we hear anything more, then for now I'll just say to do the usual stuff that people ask you to do online, which is to like and subscribe and all those things. Tell me what you're thinking of the First Light gameplay. Tell me what you're excited for, if you are excited, and whether you kind of want them to be doing more of a Hitman style James Bond game, or if you're more excited about it leaning into an action-oriented experience. So yeah, until next time, like, subscribe, and I will see you and talk to you again hopefully about something soon. Bye.